Hey guys, thank you so much for clicking on this video and sitting down to watch it. It's the longest video I have ever made. It's 50 minutes for a very good reason. It explains clearly New Zealand's political situation. You'll never hear it like this from anywhere else. So please, grab a coffee, don't switch off, buckle in and get ready for a life-changing study. I believe if you really focus all the way through this video, you'll not be the same person when you get to the end. In fact, I recommend watching it several times. Please take your time, study it, don't rush it, take it in, take time, it's worth it. Thank you so much, and I'll see you at the end. Well, hi you beautiful New Zealanders. Just before we get into the main video, I want to go over something extremely important with you, and it's how to turn New Zealand around. Well, here is something called the bell-shaped curve. That's the normal population spread of a country, say, for example. We have 3.6 million or thereabouts voters in this country. Well, down on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there's a yellow triangle. Well, what's that? Well, that is 5% of the population, say. We won't say that's exactly 5%, but let's just say for the purposes of this video, it's 5%. Well, who is this group of people? It's the unconvertible people. What do I mean by that? Well, it's people like the Maori Party. They are entrenched in their ideas. They don't want democracy. They don't want everyone equal under the law. They don't want one government for all. They want a two-tiered society with special rights for Maori. They want a dual government model for New Zealand. They want to call the country Aotearoa. They want Maori to be the main language. They want the beaches and the water to belong to Maori. They want Maori wards and seats. They want Maori language and culture to dominate the schools. They want to take control of councils. They want to take control of all dockland. They rely on a very twisted understanding of the treaty to justify these aspirations and goals, and so on. So all of this is what I call divisive, dangerous, and destructive. This is what the group on the far right-hand side bottom, that's what they stand for. Well, on the other side, we have the other 5%. What's that? That is the converted people. They're exactly the opposite of the other 5%, the Maori Party end. Well, who's in this group? Stop Co-Governance, Hobson's Pledge, Democracy Action, NZCPR, that's Frank Newman or Muriel Newman, and so on. There's other groups in there. Well, what is this group? They too are entrenched in their ideas. Well, what do they want? They want to return to the original meaning and intent of the treaty. This is a really big one for this group. They want democracy. They want everyone equal under the law. They want one government for all. They don't want a two-tiered society with special rights for Maori. They don't want a dual government model for New Zealand. They want to call the country New Zealand, not Aotearoa. They want English to be the main language. They want the beaches and the water to belong to everyone. They don't want Maori wards and seats. It's unfair. It's undemocratic. They want councils to be controlled by people voted in. They want to stop Maori language and culture from being taught in schools to all students. They are adamant that schools are for teaching the basics like maths, reading and writing and so on. Now I call this group the common sense and the wise. So that is that group. Well, what are the others here? We have the 15% group here. That's sort of the peach colored section on this graph, on this curve. And who are these? Well, these are the people who are on the way to being converted, to being like the left-hand 5%. We could say that they are doing some reading, they're doing some watching, and they are learning. They're watching videos, they're reading articles, and they're learning. And they are moving slowly towards being awakened and converted to that 5% group on the left. Well, there's another group of 15%, and who are they? Well, they are on the way to being unconvertible. They're heading towards the Maori Party. They're being radicalized. But the good thing is they are still open to change. So there's 15% in that group. Well, what about this big middle group here? This is the 60%. Who are they? Well, they are people who are oblivious to political realities. They are apathetic. They are unawakened. And they are the people who are probably just busy with life and they don't know what's going on all around them, and they will not be seeing it and not be perceiving what is happening. That is the big 60% group. Now my question is this to everybody who's watching this: where are you on this curve? Are you in the 5% already converted on the bottom left-hand side? Are you in the bottom right-hand side with the Maori party and all they believe? Are you on the 15% on the way to being converted to the 5% on the left? Or are you on the 15% being on the way to being unconvertible and the Maori party end? Or maybe you're just part of the 60% oblivious, apathetic, unawakened, busy with life group. Maybe somebody just sent you this video or one of our videos and you were browsing the internet randomly and you saw one of our videos and suddenly you're starting to thaw out, you're starting to become awakened, and hopefully you'll move into the 15% group who are on the way to being converted. You're watching and you're learning and you start reading, and then you become part of the converted group. So I want to know today, where are you? Are you on the 5% Maori party end, or are you on the way to being unconvertible, or you're in the 60% or the 15% on the way, or are you well and truly already converted? I'd love to know. Try and assess where you're at. So let me just say this again. To turn New Zealand around is just a matter of reaching more Kiwis with a video on this channel. That's what it's about. The 60% apathetic, oblivious, unawakened Kiwis, they must be awakened. That's the large middle group in the bell-shaped curve. The more subscribers we have, the more YouTube posts our videos to more Kiwis for free. This is how it works. YouTube wants to work with us, but they need more subscribers. And they'll just go, look, we'll push this out to a lot more Kiwis for you. Just get subscribers. So that's what it's about. So just click on subscribe button on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen and you'll be subscribed. It's as simple as that. Like I said, by subscribing, you'll be telling YouTube to post our videos out to more unconverted Kiwis. Subscribing is free. You'll never be charged for anything. It's just that simple. So then watch our 5% grow. That's what we're trying to do. Our goal is to convert the yet to be converted 95%. See, if we don't get to these Kiwis, all these other Kiwis, then our country's going to be lost. We're going to lose it forever for your children, your grandchildren, and we'll become the Zimbabwe of the South Pacific. So help us. Work with YouTube, and we can do this. Thanks for listening, you guys. Thanks for watching. Okay, you beautiful New Zealanders. Well, today I'm talking about the Treaty Principles Bill and 5 things the first day of oral submissions tell us. This is interesting. Well, what's in the box? In this video, I'm going to ask you where you are on what we call the bell-shaped curve. So there's something I want you to do. Number 2, I'm going to analyze just one oral submission for the Treaty Principles Bill. And number 3, I'm going to extract 5 things we can learn from this one submission. So watch. Our source document today is this document here from Radio New Zealand. You can just Google that yourself so you can read the whole thing, and I'll put a description of it in the video. All right. The opening few lines say the following. The Treaty Principles Bill is an attempt to oppress iwi Maori, according to a critic, while a supporter saw it as an attempt to ease New Zealand's anxiety over the Treaty of Waitangi. The sharply opposing views were expressed on the opening day of oral submissions at Parliament on Monday. Opponents, including Lady Tiritai Moxon, who said the bill was designed to, quote, subjugate, humiliate, assimilate, and oppress iwi Maori, unquote. So what are we to make of that sort of a statement? Well, first let's review what David Seymour's original 3 principles were. That the government has the right to govern all New Zealanders. Number 2, that the government will honour all New Zealanders in the chieftainship of their land and on their property. And number 3, that all New Zealanders are equal under the law with the same rights and duties. We could summarise these 3 in this way. 1, government for all citizens. Number 2, property rights for all. Everyone's house, contents and land is secure. And number 3, everyone is to be treated equally. Now, who'd object to these 3 principles, really? Their objections seem completely irrational. That's the Maori objections to those 3 principles. Who in the world would object? The answer is only Maori. Why? Well, look at this. Here's Maori and here's Seymour's bill. 1, government for all. Maori say no, don't want that. Seymour says yes, that's what we should have. Equal property rights. Maori say no. Seymour says yes. And equal quality of citizenship. Maori say absolutely no. And Seymour says yes. So they are completely at odds with each other. So why 3 no's from Maori on 3 fundamental human rights? Rights all other people on earth would agree with. What's going on? You know, when you really think it through, you think, you know, there's something going on in the background here that we can't see, that we don't know about. Well, I'm going to show you what that is. Because there's something going on here that they're not telling, and I'm going to reveal what it is in this video. By rejecting Seymour's bill, Maori are becoming an international laughingstock. Well, watch this.
The viral moment that just took place in the Parliament of New Zealand, on the other hand, does have some relevance for Americans. It's one of the more important political stories of the year, in fact, even though it's taking place thousands of miles away from our borders. And in case you missed it, several politicians in New Zealand just broke out into a primal Stone Age war dance called the haka to protest a piece of legislation that's working its way through Parliament. They won't stop doing the chant, and eventually, because of that, Parliament has to be shut down entirely. Watch.
E ono ngā pōti e whakahe. Kawana! Ka whakamanu whiriti a koe! Kamate, kamate,
The House is suspended until the ringing of the bells. The gallery is to be cleared.
Now, you know, this haka dance, it's very dangerous. And you can tell the people doing it, they think it's real spooky and really scary. It's real intimidating. And they're right, it is dangerous because it may cause everybody in the vicinity to die of secondhand embarrassment. You know, it's hard to watch this video and not have the same reaction that the Speaker of Parliament has. It's painful to sit through. Thankfully, a few people have dubbed the audio in various ways. There's one remix that turns it into a jazzy little piano number from 1925. It actually works surprisingly well. And because it's a Friday, we might as well play it. Plus, it shows you another angle so that, you know, we can justify playing it that way, I guess, also. Watch. You know, it's a lot less cringe when you dub in some real music instead of the prehistoric grunting. Now, it's a little hard to see in all the pandemonium, but they're getting in the face of a politician named David Seymour, who introduced a bill that they don't like. The people doing the screeching identify as Maori, meaning they see themselves as the allegedly indigenous people of New Zealand, and they're chanting like barbarians and making gun gestures at David Seymour while saying something that apparently translates to evil. And before I get into the specifics about this vote, what it was about, it needs to be reiterated that this whole haka thing is just silly and embarrassing. Maybe you're not supposed to say that, but it's obviously true. And everybody who sees it knows that, feels the same way. You know, and you see these videos, so that we're supposed to pretend like we think it's powerful and cool because it's part of a non-white culture, and so therefore it has to be good. We're not allowed to have any negative opinions about anything that a non-white culture does. But we all know that it's just lame and stupid as hell. And you know, we can say that. Like that, just knock it off. This is ridiculous. You're making fools of yourself. These people are really embarrassing themselves. In every context that this haka is performed, it's cringeworthy to an immeasurable, painful degree. Which is why this just doesn't work. You can't do a fearsome war dance on behalf of a conquered people and then get conquered some more. It's just kind of sad at this point. You know, the Maori have been doing this dance for centuries and they just get beaten every time in every context, in every type of battle they've ever been in, at least for the last 700 years. So, you know, it's like probably time to put it's like spiking the football when you're on a football team that hasn't won a game since the year 1300. It's just like, all right, it's probably not a lot to be showboating about right now. In any event, back to the viral clip that people are talking about. The so-called indigenous people had a meltdown in Parliament over a bill.
Now, this is the bit that I really wanted you to see. It's talking about the international embarrassment Maori are bringing New Zealand through their attitude to these three fundamental human rights. This video has had 1 million views, and we've not got another video in New Zealand that's had 1 million views like this. So most of those 1 million views would have been international people who are watching this country, and the report is not good. So just watch what happens here.
And what you may not have seen is what preceded that moment. David Seymour laid out some rational and calm arguments in favor of his legislation, and then the so-called Maori politicians launched into a volley of personal attacks. Watch.
Pressure had been building all afternoon as the government's treaty principles bill came before the House.
The bill does not extinguish any right, it does not take from anyone, it reinforces the rights of the treaty as universal.
David Seymour says the current approach to treaty principles isn't working.
What all of these principles have in common is that they afford Māori different rights from other New Zealanders.
But the rebuttal came fast and furious.
Shame, shame on you, David Seymour. Ngāti Rehia will be ashamed that one of their sons has come up with a political stunt that looks to divide the nation. How dare you, David Seymour? You should be ashamed of yourself, and you are a liar.
Apologise for that last statement.
No, I can't do that.
Going to have to ask the member to withdraw himself from the House for the rest of the afternoon.
Willie Jackson sin-binned, but unapologetic.
Now already, this is how you know these people have no argument. They're only capable of shouting shame and resorting to personal attacks to the point that they repeatedly get thrown out of Parliament. Meanwhile, David Seymour sitting there calmly saying he wants equality. Now, admittedly, I'm not an expert on the finer details of New Zealand politics, so I went looking through some New Zealand outlets to try to get as complete a picture as I could about what's going on here, what the controversy is. Turns out the concept of equal protection under the law is actually extremely controversial in New Zealand. So here's the background. Hundreds of years ago, around the late 13th century, Polynesian settlers arrived by canoe in New Zealand, and they became the Maori people. Depending on who you ask, they were either the first to arrive or they massacred everyone else who was already there when they got there. In any event, before long, the Maori wiped out a different tribe called the Moriori, I think is probably how you pronounce it, who were pacifists living in the Chatham Islands in the east. And they got enslaved and beheaded and cannibalized by the Maori because apparently that's what, civilized cultures do. And to be clear, this kind of thing was not out of character for the Maori. The Maori routinely enslaved and brutalized their enemies, just like so-called indigenous cultures all over the world. I mean, this is what they all did. The moment they acquired muskets from European traders, they fought a series of battles amongst themselves called the Musket Wars, which led to tens of thousands of deaths and even more slavery. These are wars, of course, the Maori now blame the British for. They also bartered with severed heads, which they called toi moko. They would cut people's heads off and tattoo them and then use them for trading. This is kind of what Maori culture was all about. Cutting heads off each other, bartering, cannibalizing. Big thing with the Maoris. Eventually, the British came in and provided some stability with something called the Treaty of Waitangi. The idea was that New Zealand would become a British colony, but that the Maori would have their rights protected. They could keep their land and so on to the extent that was possible. And then in 1975, New Zealand recognized this treaty in law for the first time. But there was still a big gray area as to what exactly this treaty required. It established tribunals and led to a lot of rulemaking by judges, but Parliament mostly stayed out of it. Now, with this new bill, David Seymour is trying to change that. He's proposing concrete legislation that will clarify that everybody in the country, in New Zealand, whether they are Maori or not, is entitled to the full protection of the law. He also wants to make it clear that New Zealand is self-governing. The Maori are not a nation within a nation. Here's how one New Zealand station describes the proposed clarifications.
Let's compare the current main three principles with the bill before Parliament. On partnership, the treaty created a relationship between Māori and the Crown, and both parties must act with the utmost good faith. The new Principle 1 states the government has full power to govern and Parliament has the full power to make laws in the best interests of everyone. Principle 3 addresses protection. The existing understanding is that the government prioritises the active protection of Maori interests, rights, taonga and rangatiratanga. The new proposed Principle 3 states everyone is equal before the law and entitled to equal protection and benefit without discrimination. Everyone is entitled to the equal enjoyment of the same human rights without discrimination.
So these are clarifications that if you want to live in a modern civilization, an advanced civilization, instead of a backwards hellhole, seem pretty reasonable. But it does mark a change from what's happening at the moment. Right now, New Zealand explicitly provides reparations to people who identify as Maori. In addition to affirmative action, they just announced a, quote, financial redress of $30 million plus interest to Maori tribes, along with a fund of more than $1 million to assist with cultural revitalization. New Zealand politicians also regularly give lengthy apologies to the tribes, like this one. Watch.
I'm here at Ngāti Maru's official settlement ceremony, where a representative from the Crown is going to deliver an official apology.
The Crown makes the following apology to Ngāti Maru. The Crown's many breaches of Te Tiriti o Waitangi left Ngāti Maru feeling like refugees in their own homeland.
Yep, just keep apologizing. 500 years of apologies won't be enough. Just keep on forever. It could be 1,000 years from now. We need more apologies. Just keep on apologizing. This kind of thing has been going on for decades in New Zealand. They fly the Maori flag. They apologize to them incessantly, pay millions of dollars. And in the end, it's not enough. The demands keep coming. As a result, now their news reports are barely comprehensible because they're all speaking a foreign language. So here, for example, is how that New Zealand television station explains what the Maori are so upset about.
One of the major concerns from opponents of the bill is the absence of any mention of tino rangatiratanga that loosely translates to Maori autonomy. The bill proposes to take those principles to a referendum for the public once passed, but it's a bill that looks doomed to never get to that stage.
Did you get that? Tena rangatiratanga. Is that how you pronounce it? I think I nailed it. I think I just nailed it. I think that's how you pronounce it. Anyway, yes, one of the main criticisms of the bill is whatever that is. They have to translate it so that people in New Zealand can understand what's even going on. So it turns out that the Maori want the ability to remain autonomous from New Zealand, which in democracy seems pretty questionable. The opposition wants to put that up for a democratic vote, and of course the Maori are refusing. They don't care what the people of New Zealand think about what should happen in New Zealand. But the people of New Zealand should care, and we should care as well, because what's happening over there is a case study that we should pay attention to. And what I mean by that is that New Zealand has bent over backwards, apologizing for the alleged evils of colonization. They've paid out reparations, they've flown the flags, they've done everything. They've centered their whole society around land acknowledgements and so on. And now there are pagan chants breaking out in the middle of Parliament. That's what they get for all of this kowtowing and bowing and submitting. This is what they get. The Maori are explicitly campaigning against equal rights. And they're threatening politicians who don't agree with them. This is a sort of enrichment that Western societies can expect when they start apologizing for their own existence. And as Douglas Murray has pointed out, none of this makes any sense given the Maori's history. If we're going to play the game of generational guilt, they should be apologizing to all the people that their ancestors have enslaved. Watch.
I'm sorry, who were the Maoris historically? Were they men and women of peace who sat around idyllically farming and having an Edenically civilized life? Or were they brutal, brutal people who did terrible things to each other and to people they met? The trade in decapitated human heads as a tool of bartering to buy goods, including muskets, by the early 1800s. I'm sorry, I'm not willing to have my own culture ransacked and turned through this lens of pure evil, and simultaneously be expected to pretend that the Maoris or the indigenous people of Australia were these proto-Gandhi-esque figures, sort of Mother Teresa with a bit too much beheading. No, this is totally untrue. And it's an obvious attempt to subjugate people in the West to a false ideology and a false version of our own past.
So, as he correctly explains there, the Maori were a violent, brutal people. They practiced cannibalism, many other forms of horrific brutality. But just because they made it to New Zealand a few hundred years before Europeans, we're supposed to see it as some great tragedy that the Europeans took over. In fact, we're supposed to blame Europeans for engaging in violent conquest over people who themselves engaged in even more violent conquest. So keep this absurd debasing spectacle in mind whenever you hear about reparations in this country or about how oppressed some indigenous groups allegedly are. Even if you give these people what they want for decades, they will always want more. No matter how much you apologize and pay money, it doesn't matter. The moment you suggest withdrawing some of these privileges, or even just like expanding it so that everybody benefits, they revolt. Descend into primal chants on the floor of Parliament. Turn your entire government into an international laughingstock.
Let me just play it again. That's a huge line. We become an international laughingstock through all this.
Turn your entire government into an international laughingstock. That's why the only approach to dealing with people like this, the one that New Zealand should have adopted a long time ago, is to deny them any special privileges in the first place. And to deny them the pleasure of hearing you apologize when you've got nothing to apologize for.
You know what, at this point you might be saying to yourself, well, what about all the reparations to Maori for all the terrible things done to them in history? Yeah, well, what about that? There was a day when I would have asked the same question, you know that? But two things have changed my mind completely about reparations. The first is the testimony of New Zealand's greatest Maori, Sir Rananata. He said this: "Let me acknowledge first that in the whole world, I doubt whether any native race has been so well treated by the European people as the Maori." Doesn't get any clearer than that, and there's the reference. He also said, "Some have said that these confiscations were wrong and that they contravened the articles of the Treaty of Waitangi. The government placed in the hands of the Queen of England the sovereignty and the authority to make laws. This is what happened. Some sections of the Maori people violated that authority. War arose from this and blood was spilled. The law came into operation and land was taken in payment. It was their own chiefs who ceded that right to the Queen. The confiscations cannot therefore be objected to in light of the treaty," and there is the reference. You see, it's so clear. We have the same thing today with the Proceeds of Crime Act, where the police can go in and take a gang's houses and jet skis and motorbikes and cash, and what are they going to do in 200 years? Go back and say, hey, the Crown violated the Treaty of Waitangi with the gangs? Come on. The second thing that made me question Maori reparations is this book by Dr. John Robinson. There it is on the right-hand side. He agrees with Sir Rananata. Well, what's this book about? Dr. Robinson has researched all the wars that ever took place between Maori and the British, and he comes to this conclusion, quote, "All treaty settlements are based on the Crown having broken the treaty. Since the Crown never broke the treaty, all such settlements are a fraud. There is no justification for the continued existence of their settlements or the Waitangi Tribunal. We must set aside the ridiculous, imaginative propaganda of a successful Maori culture severely harmed from the very start by brutal colonization," and there's the reference. Look at that. See that? So all this money being given by the government through settlements, so-called, and in the last video we found out that there were 10,000 settlements in the pipeline. All these assets and cash being given away by central government through local councils like the Wanganui Council. There's no basis for them. This is what this book says. This is what Sir Rananata said. So what are we doing today? What's going on? I recommend all Kiwis read this book. TVNZ is an activist TV station. This is well known. To try and stop Kiwis from reading these and other TROSS publishing books to learn the truth about New Zealand's history, TV1 did a hit job on this publisher. This hit job was New Zealand's version of the book burnings in Nazi Germany in the 1930s. The book burnings were a campaign in Germany and Austria in the 1930s to burn books that were against Nazi ideology. The campaign was part of a cultural genocide. TVNZ is state-funded, we know that. Yet the National Party does nothing to replace the board and senior executives of TVNZ who are known activists. What are they doing? Why don't they have a purge? I have done a video on TVNZ which you can watch. I have left a link to it in the description of this video. So watch this hit job. Honestly, it's disgraceful.
A Wellington company accused of publishing books that are anti-Māori, inaccurate and harmful has been going door to door promoting its work at high schools. TROSS Publishing has a collection of books that claim Māori come from a dysfunctional, violent and Stone Age culture. But one school has found a use for them, to teach students about misinformation. Here's Māori Affairs reporter Te Aniwa Hurihanganui.
This librarian is big on teaching students the difference between quality and crap.
We use a thing called a crap test, where we teach the students to check the content and the relevance and the accuracy.
The test used on books like these from TROSS Publishing, work she describes as disturbing but surprisingly useful.
These are great examples of books that are written emotively, written with an agenda. Some of the sources that are used are really old and therefore not challenged, and that's why we have a couple of these texts in our schools, because we need to nurture our students to understand the minefield of misinformation.
Some of TROSS Publishing's books describe Māori as dysfunctional and entitled, one author insisting it's not Māori bashing. The company has visited Cambridge High School 3 times to promote its work. Other schools have been approached too.
Some schools choose not to stock them because of the huge disinformation that they perceive that they have.
This academic is deeply concerned.
When you pick these publications up, they can be traumatising. As to whether or not it's appropriate in schools, absolutely not.
Māori can internalise this stuff, and it results in, this internalised hatred. And it's the last thing that we need, really.
Many books by TROSS Publishing refer to historical events like the 1881 Crown invasion of Parihaka. This one says there were no casualties and just a single injury after a child's foot was stood on. It forgets to mention that women were raped, houses were destroyed, and people were forcibly evicted from their homes.
They do these things where they try to downplay the tragedy. I mean, it's quite sad, and what it can be best to be determined as a form of denial.
In a statement, TROSS Publishing told One News all the accusations are false, that its books are based on historical fact without revisionist or other agenda and are heavily referenced. It also said it resented our continuing attacks on free speech.
New Zealand history will be taught in all schools from 2022. But John James Carberry says TROSS Publishing books don't belong in the history section of any library.
Hopefully educators will see it for what it is, which is opinion pieces, and it belongs within that category.
At Cambridge High School, the books are kept in a back room and handled carefully, leaving space on shelves for work that's peer-reviewed and has the support of universities and iwi. Te Aniwa Hurihanganui, One News.
So I want you to just take my advice. Who are we to believe? TROSS Publishing or TVNZ? Well, the only way to tell is to get the books, read them, and you decide for yourself. That's the best way to tell, isn't it? The best test is the self-test. Just in case you're wondering, I have absolutely no financial interest in TROSS Publishing, in case you're thinking about that. They happen to be a great source of truth about New Zealand's history that I have found. You know what? In fact, as an academic myself, and after reading many of their books, I would rate them the #1 source of truth about our history in our country. There's other historians I read as well, and I read very, very widely, but I would rate TROSS Publishing as being the #1 source of truth about our history for people in New Zealand. It's a great company. So just Google TROSS Publishing and you'll find them yourself. Okay, right, back to Matt Walsh.
Or how about this? How about saying to anyone, any indigenous group, anywhere in the world, you apologize first. Okay? You get up and make a big show and fall to your knees apologizing for all the terrible things your ancestors did. You apologize first. You lead by example. When are we going to get an indigenous group anywhere in the world that does that? You apologize for all the terrible things your ancestors did. You do that first, and then we can talk. I'm still not going to apologize, but at least you will have shown that you're not a raging hypocrite. As the saying goes, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. And at this point, now that Stone Age war chants have broken out in Parliament, probably too late for New Zealand to correct their mistake. And that should be a pretty big clue to everybody in this country that unless we also want to return to the Stone Age, we should take a very different approach. We should affirm the greatness of Western civilization and make no apology for it. We should take pride in our heritage, in our culture, in our history. We should reject the false narratives, the cartoonish, simplistic narratives about our history that turn us and our ancestors into cartoon villains. That's how you neutralize the grievance mongers and the guilt merchants so they have no power. They can do their tribal chants all they want. They can do them in the shower, in their own homes, whatever. The rest of us will be doing what New Zealand is apparently now incapable of doing. We'll be living a functioning, self-governing democracy. And if there's one lesson from these bizarre and embarrassing clips out of New Zealand, it's that no one should ever take that for granted.
To find out why, wasn't that great? To find out why Maori are objecting to these three basic rights, we have to go to a document produced by Maori for Maori called He Puapua, and there it is on the right-hand side. The report was conducted by the Ministry of Maori Development, who in August 2019 set up a, quote, declaration working group of 4 government officials and 5 non-state representatives. Now, the report was returned to the Maori Development Minister in December 2019, but was not released until the opposition were leaked a copy and made the document public in 2021. In other words, Maori were doing this thing, keeping it quiet, trying to do it under the table and keep it all quiet while they were progressing with it, but they got busted. And it all came out, and then it created a great furore that this is what Maori were planning. So let's have a look at this document. On the inside cover of this document, it says the following, quote, He Puapua means a break, which usually refers to a break in the waves. Here, it refers to the breaking of the usual political and societal norms and approaches. Now, did you notice that? Come on. Breaking the norms. This is what it says. What does that mean? Well, it means no to one government. That's a big break. No to property rights and property security. That's another big break. And no to equality. This is an out-of-this-world break. Who would agree with that? But Maori are saying no to all three. Why? Because Maori want to be the government. They don't want to be under a government. Maori believe that all their land was stolen and they want it back. The truth is that they sold 92% of their land after 1840, but nobody talks about that. And I'll put a document in the description of this video that actually gives proof that Maori sold 92% of their land. Well, that's not going to happen if everyone's property rights are locked down. Maori aren't going to get all their land back if everybody's property rights are locked down, you see. As it stands, through the RMA, that's the Resource Management Act, Maori can target any land in New Zealand by slapping a classification on that land. It's happened to me personally, this. For example, Wahitapu, one day I just had on my land, some documentation arrives that your land is now Wahitapu. It's sacred Maori land, and the story they made up to justify why it was made Wahitapu was absolutely BS through and through. It was complete BS. But there you go. Now they've got control of my land, and I can't do anything on it without their permission, you see. This is what's going on. This is how they sneakily get hold of people's land, and they could do it with anybody. Other parts of the RMA's classifications, Section 6 are outstanding natural landscapes, outstanding natural features, significant natural features, rural scenic landscapes, rural scenic sites and significance to Maori. Now that last one is a big one because that opens the door to them claiming anybody's land. Man, this is really serious. You say, how did this happen? How was this allowed? Why was this allowed? How was this allowed? It's really bad. The answer is, Woke, Maorification-loving bureaucrats and consultants, those who have joined the Maori religion, because that's what it is, have infiltrated Parliament. This is what's happening. These bureaucrats are running Parliament. They formulated the RMA, and MPs were too out of touch with reality to be over the detail. Probably, many of them too up themselves to even worry about the detail. This is what's going on. So we're going to talk about Maori goals. What we need to understand is that if Maori are treated equally, if everyone is treated equally, Maori can't achieve their goals. Well, you're going to ask, the goals set out in Hei Puapua, what are those goals? Well, I'm going to tell you. Here is Dr. John Robinson, and he's one of New Zealand's #1 researchers and historians, and he wrote a book called Hei Puapua, The Blueprint for Breaking Up New Zealand. Now, you can get this book from TROSS Publishing. You just Google TROSS, T-R-O-S-S Publishing, and you'll find it. And he analysed the Hei Puapua document, and he's a very bright man. He's a real researcher, and he's got incredible integrity. This is what he said. Many of the activists and iwi leaders intend a totally dual government system with separate Maori and non-Maori houses of parliament, and a Maori veto on all legislation. Now, that last bit that I've put in yellow is crucial. A Maori veto on all legislation means private tribal companies have the final say on everything that goes on in New Zealand, on what laws and legislation are passed and accepted in both houses of parliament. Dr. Robinson goes on to say the words in the Hei Puapua report insist that power, full authority, must go to Maori. In other words, Maori want to be in complete control of the country. That's where we're headed. And there's the reference. So you might ask, when's all this going to happen? Well, when's this going to happen by? Well, it actually says the declaration plan sets out our vision for 2040 in which the declaration is realised. That's on page 2. So they've actually gone out there and said we're going to have New Zealand in our pocket by 2040. This is frightening. Now here's another document that Dr. Robinson actually refers to. It's called MATIKE Mai Aotearoa. So on the right is another publication which helps to explain why Maori are irrationally furious about David Seymour's bill. Here's a quote. The proposal of MATIKE Mai Aotearoa gives the iwi leadership around 3/4 of the power to rule the entire country together with a veto in the joint sphere, that's the other quarter. Everyone else will be disenfranchised. This is a blueprint, says John Robinson, for the complete rule of New Zealand by a determined minority. See? And there's the reference. So we're talking about a coup here. Now can you see why Maori are irrationally and furiously committed to stopping Seymour's bill? Well, they could sense they were moving in for the kill, and boom, they list all the things that the government's given them over the last 25 years and how they're getting this and that and how everything was going so well, and then suddenly David Seymour's bill comes along and it represents a massive threat to their 240 plans and aspirations. That's the truth of the matter. The dictionary defines irrational like this: lacking usual or normal mental clarity or coherence, not endowed with reason or understanding. Now, when you look at the people in the oral submissions and what they're saying about those who are against the bill, that they are lacking usual or normal mental clarity or cohesion. They're not endowed with reason or understanding. And Lady Moxham's one is a classic example. It's a clanger. That's Maori with the Treaty Principles Bill. That's them. So what would happen if their 2040 plans were scuttled? Well, that's a good question. Well, here's the answer. The gravy train would end. What would happen then? They won't be able to finance the takeover. Think about it. If they become equal citizens with everyone else, then the handout, special privilege, compensation, special tax rates, special deals done through settlements to get land and resources and cash, the same special backroom deals done with councils, special Maori-only funding, the gifting of dockland and beaches, mountains, water and rivers, and on it goes. It all dries up if David Seymour's bill is made law. As I said, this explains their huge and irrational opposition to David's bill. This explains why they would be so incensed by 3 basic fundamental human rights. It all has to do with 2040 and their march to take control of New Zealand. That's what it's about. So when Lady Moxham says the bill was designed to subjugate, humiliate, assimilate, and oppress iwi Maori, the irony is that this is exactly the plan Maori have in mind for Pākehā by 2040. Isn't that ironic? And do you know what is the most tragic of all? Since 1975, successive governments have not woken up to the fact that they are funding the takeover of their own country. Actually, through them, we are funding it via our taxes. That's pretty tragic. As the saying goes, all men make mistakes, only the fools keep repeating them. And you know, our politicians keep on repeating the same old mistakes, and they've been doing it since 1975. Well, I said at the beginning that I'd give you 5 things that we can learn from just this one submission. So what are these 5 things? Well, for number 1, Maori want to be in control of New Zealand by 2040. Number 2, this explains why their protests about David Seymour's bill are so furious and irrational. Number 3, Maori are not being honest about why they oppose the bill. All the excuses they come up with are just pure spin. That's what they are. They are also just all opinion and no facts when you read through them. What they say the bill is doing to them is ironically what they are going to do to Pākehā in 2040 or sooner if they get there. Like lambs to the slaughter, MPs have been and still are funding the takeover, all the while thinking they are amazing. And the chief guy in that respect is this one right here. And man, does he think he's wonderful, giving Maori everything. Okay guys, that's enough for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Now we need your help with something. This is important. We have produced some great flyers and brochures which we want to get into the hands of all New Zealanders. So we need to go around the mainstream media. They're not going to help. In fact, they're making things a lot worse. So we have to go around them. And we need your help to make this happen. We can't do this without you. So what are we talking about? First, there is our business cards. They're only 3 cents each plus courier to get them to you. Then there is our latest booklet called The Psychology of Takeover, 19 strategies Maori activists are using to take over the country. It's 80 pages and packs a huge punch. So they're cheap, they're $3, and they're absolutely fantastic if you want to get a handle on what's actually happening in New Zealand. Then we have a few thousand of our original Stop Co-Governance booklets left over from my tour in 2023. Remember these? You'll remember we printed 550,000 of these. Well, these are now free because we realized that only about a third of New Zealand houses got this booklet last when I did my tour, and so we want to get to the other 2/3. So if you do a few streets around where you live, that would be absolutely phenomenal, and they are free now. Then we have our MACA, that's Marine and Coastal Act brochure 2, which alert people to the loss of our beaches. You know, we're in danger of losing all the beaches around New Zealand. The text is written by Graham Adams, who's a great author. These are now free. And then we have our beautiful bumper sticker, which we've just made. And why are we doing this? Well, New Zealand's identity is under threat. We know that. First activists have and are still trying to change the name of New Zealand to Aotearoa. We don't want that. We must oppose this. This is rubbish. Where's the referendum saying that we want to change the name of the country? There was none. It was just forced on us. Second, Maori sovereignty flags are appearing more and more all over the place, and they're just treason. So we've got to get these bumper stickers out. So we've printed some awesome bumper stickers. They're $3 each, and they measure 21.5 by 6.5, so you can see how big that would be on your car. To get any of these free products, all you need to do is pay for the courier to get them to you. For the products that cost something, like the bumper stickers or the little psychology booklet, it's the cost plus the courier to get them to you. So to order any of these products, just use this email address, cards@stopcogovernance.kiwi, and we'd love to hear from you. Finally, if you want to access all the videos we've ever made, including all our most viewed and most popular videos, and have them all in one place, which is what people are asking for, then just type in this address into your browser. There it is there, https www.youtube.com/@stopcogovernance, and you'll find it goes straight to our channel. Then what you do is save this address to your computer as a favorite. Job done. Well done. Then you've got them all in one place forever. And all the new ones that are coming in get placed into that address, so you won't miss anything. Okay, last thing, please, oh please, don't forget to subscribe. When you subscribe, you'll get the latest videos straight into your inbox. You'll never miss a video, which is great. You'll link up with like-minded people all over New Zealand, and that's very, very stimulating to have meet up with all these people who think like you. You'll be telling YouTube, I like these videos, and they will respond by advertising our videos to more Kiwis for free. It's incredible what they do, but it just relies on you replying to comments and making comments and liking things and sharing things and activity. That's what it is. It's just activity on our channel. And turning New Zealand around is simply a matter of reaching more Kiwis with the truth. So just click on the subscribe button on the bottom right hand side of your screen. The little yellow arrow is showing you where it is, and you'll be subscribed. Okay, see you next time. You guys are awesome.